Secretary, thank you for making time. I know you're still jet-lagged from your holiday trip, but I appreciate you making the effort, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting. I always think of invitations from you as worthwhile in terms of exploring various interesting topics of the day.
Thank you, sir. Well, you know, you've been out of the country for a while, so maybe you have an outsider's point of view, but how do you see the Philippines today in general terms? Maybe the economic landscape, the political landscape, but what's your reading of the situation now? Are you optimistic for 2023, or are you feeling something else?
Well, you know, I'm always an optimist. So I'd say that if I were to describe my outlook, it would be guarded optimism.
Guarded optimism, okay.
Partly because I hardly am ever pessimistic, since I think that a lot of things can be taken calmly, and if the right approach and solutions are brought to bear, then we will weather the storm. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't any specific reasons for my guarded optimism.
Sure.
The reasons are these. We're coming out of 2022 with a growth rate that is 7%.
Right.
And that means we have rebounded from COVID.
From the COVID, yeah.
If you recall, the depths of COVID saw our growth rate go to minus 11.
Yes.
And we had to go to the various financial transactions in order to keep the entire economy moving, which meant high debt and fiscal resources being stretched to the limit. But now that the economy has rebounded,
okay,
you see demand building up again.
Okay.
From the supply side, you see the services sector leading the way.
Okay.
And from the demand side, you see people getting back to employment, consumption, and demand for purchasing goods, etc. We're on the rise.
Okay.
And therefore, this is, you might say, a rebound.
Okay.
From minus 11 now to plus 7.
Okay.
So that is the situation that we're ending the previous year with.
Okay.
However, in 2023, there are two things.
Okay.
One is that the big rebound cannot be as big because much of it has already rebounded.
Right.
So you're rebounding from a higher base.
Right.
And secondly, there are challenges in 2023 which were not there in 2022 beyond COVID.
Okay.
COVID continues to lurk there somewhere, but I think...
You're not so worried about it anymore.
I think we've addressed it to the point where we can treat COVID less as a pandemic, as an endemic approach.
Right.
But we didn't have war to deal with, and now we have a global war,
Ukraine,
kind of raging, that has to be dealt with. And because of this, the world economy has found itself challenged, particularly the developed countries in the West, and the spillover from the difficulties that have arisen because of that are going to be challenging for us as well. So, most forecasters are looking at 2023 growth as anywhere between 5.5% to 6%, which therefore is lower than the 7% we're experiencing in 2022. And one of the biggest challenges we will have to face in 2023 is how to keep inflation within bounds while the challenges that are coming externally continue to be there.
Now, you just came from the States, and of course, that somehow influences also the whole world, right?
The funny thing is, when I came back from the States, I vibered some of my friends, and I said, you know, I just came back from the States, and it felt like I hadn't even left home because inflation was so high. Food prices were escalating.
Right.
There were some shortages of basic foodstuffs in the groceries. And at the same time, they suddenly had a shutdown of their entire aviation system.
Right, similar to what we had.
So I said, it felt like home. Bit of a joke, but the United States is facing the highest inflation rate they've faced in decades. And the Fed, the Federal Reserve, has been increasing interest rates
Right.
more than 3 times already.
Right.
And the rest of us and the rest of the world will have no choice but to also do our own control
Right.
of the value of our currency as this escalation drives up
Right.
the value of the dollar in their effort to control their own inflation. So their problems
Become ours.
become the world's problem.
I was going to say, some people predict that the U.S. might go into a recession after this efforts to fight its inflation. Do you think that will happen, and what would be the implication to us here? Do you think? How
I
likely?
think most observers are thinking that the U.S. is going to go into a recession
Okay.
for 2 reasons. As of today, they haven't really gotten their inflation under control.
Okay.
The last reading was still in the vicinity of 7%,
Okay.
and they're targeting to go back to 2%.
Right.
But even as the Federal Reserve and their monetary system is trying to rein in economic activity and absorbing excess dollars, the fiscal side seems to be doing the opposite, in the sense that as I was leaving the U.S., they seem to have passed a $1 trillion program, Build Back Better. I don't remember what they call it.
I think that's what it is.
But that will escalate the amount of debt that they have to get, because they can't get it from just their internal resources.
Right.
And you can only get debt by floating bonds in the international market, or you borrow from the Fed, which means the Fed prints.
Right.
And the more you print,
The higher the inflation.
the higher the inflation is going to go. So if they can't control themselves on that front, then they'll have to rely on the Federal Reserve to control it by continuing to escalate the interest rates. There was a time in the history of the United States, I think this was the time of a Federal Reserve chairman by the name of Paul Volcker.
Oh yes.
Okay? He was very interested in controlling inflation rates at that time too.
Carter administration.
Because the Carter administration's inflation rate was the highest, and it's matched now.
Yeah.
And Volcker brought it up to 20%. And as a result, the rest of the world ended
Suffered,
up in debt.
Yeah.
So that could be the spillover. What worries me more, of course, or maybe it should worry those people more, is that Western Europe is due for a serious recession.
Yeah.
Maybe the U.S. will go into a recession, but I don't think it will be in the scale,
Okay.
hopefully, that Western Europe is going to experience, because Western Europe is in the middle of a war,
Yes.
and sanctions to some extent against Russia have to some extent backfired,
Right.
so that their energy system is totally
Right. They were
outside.
so dependent on Russia.
They
Yeah.
were so dependent. So their energy prices are escalating,
Right.
and the imports of fertilizer, wheat, and so forth that they get from Russia and Ukraine are now in short supply, if not cut off.
Yeah.
So the supply chain. Anyway, all of that is going to make life extremely difficult for Europe, and they are going through a stage now where winter
Right. Right.
is upon them.
Right.
At a time when energy costs are escalating,
Yeah.
and supply chains are aggravating the entire situation. So these are the things that are going to make the global situation a bit more challenging.
Is there a way to insulate the Philippines? I mean, perhaps not completely, but are there maybe policy interventions that can help mitigate the ripple effects?
Yes, there are, but not all of them will be, you might say, will make a 100% solution. The first, of course, is monetary policy.
Right.
So as you can see, the BSP is trying to maintain the value of our currency and the rate of our inflation within bounds. And that they're doing, on the one hand, by escalating interest rates gradually in order that the economic activity doesn't overflow to inflationary rates.
Okay.
And the other is, of course, from time to time, trying to intervene by using their global reserves or by using some kind of a debt flotation in order to keep our currency value from getting out of hand. Now, they seem to have kind of succeeded, huh?
Okay.
Because if you recall, as we were approaching the end of 2022, everybody was panicking about the peso going to 60 and so
That's
forth
right.
and so on. But as of yesterday, it's just
54 something,
54.9
yeah.
or something like that. So the monetary part seems to be fairly well under control, although I don't see them stopping escalations of interest rates if the U.S. and the Western Europe continue to escalate there. That's why I said it's not a perfect solution, because
Right.
some of it will depend on the moves
Right.
of the big guys. The second, of course, has to do with being able to control prices of commodities. There are two commodities that we have to be careful about,
Okay.
whether it is the short term or the long term. One is energy,
Okay.
and the other is food.
Okay.
Okay. Very critical to the economy. Energy comprises the biggest chunk of our importations.
Okay.
And energy prices, of course, are escalating because of the war, mainly. And it's going to reflect on fuel prices at the pump. This may be a controversial statement,
Okay.
but that solution, the approach to that problem was done by India by importing
Okay.
Russian oil at a
Okay.
discount,
Okay.
to the chagrin of the West.
Of the West, yeah.
But India's response was, hey, your enemy is not my enemy,
Right.
and I'm acting on my own national interest.
Are we vulnerable to sanctions? I mean,
Well,
I know we're diversifying our trade
the-
partners, right? But
The, what should I say, activity,
okay.
the drumbeat
Right.
of the West is to try to isolate
Russia.
make it a pariah state,
Right.
and get as many other states either by friendship or
Right.
by persuasion
Yeah.
to go along with the game
Yeah.
plan. We have always been vulnerable to sanctions and so forth that could have a effect on us as well. However, if India is to be a model, that may be something to explore. Many countries are in the process of importing Russian oil indirectly. Well, I'll leave it to our Department of Energy
Right.
and Foreign Affairs people to figure that out. But many countries have decided that it is in their national interest to look for the lowest price of fuel they can get their hands on. Sanctions from the West notwithstanding. Okay, that's energy for the short term.
Right.
I say for the short term because there is also this move, and the president announced it, of bringing down our pollution levels,
Yes.
et cetera,
With renewables.
and going to renewables much more by some year, I don't remember what, 2040. And that has to be done smartly.
Okay.
By smartly, I mean probably the best example of not doing it smartly would be Western Europe.
Okay.
They decided to go headlong
Right.
into solar and wind
Right.
and so forth, while at the same time being dependent
On
on
Russia.
Russian oil. And as a result, they have the highest energy prices
Right.
anywhere.
Yeah.
And it has been proven time and time again that while solar and wind might be commendable, cleaner, and so forth and so on, neither one has yet proven itself to be reliable base load energy sources.
Right.
As a result, you still have quite a number of countries using other fuels, natural gas, some still coal, and there's a prospect of looking again at the viability of nuclear power. So I bring that up because it is important, therefore, for a country not to just suddenly jump into this fashion of saying that, oh, because of climate change, which is going to end the lives of the entire world by a certain date, we got to put windmills all over the place and so forth and so on. We have to transition our energy composition in a rational manner. That's energy. Now, food.
Let me, I'll get back to food in a minute, Secretary, because you're giving us a lot to chew on. We just have to take a quick break. This is Business of Politics with Secretary Ocampo.